Coke will try to tell you that their biggest secret is the drink secret formula, which is hidden in a high security vault for dramatic effect. But the formula isn't that secret. It's on Wikipedia. Of course, Coca-Cola's success has very little to do with the formula. You could create a clone product, but you're never going to be able to compete with them. Let's look at why. One day a teacher at a new school suggested to the headmaster they add some healthier choices to the school vending machines, like some fruit juices. She was horrified when she was told it wouldn't be possible, because the school had an exclusive contract with Coca-Cola. Coke paid the school $3,000 a year, or around $1 per student, in order to dictate which products the school sold. It turns out, contracts like this had been struck with countless different schools as part of Coke's cradle-to-grave strategy. Basically, the best way to make someone a Coke customer for life is to ensure they drink it from the earliest age possible. One Coke marketing chief pointed out that it's far easier to get them at a young, vulnerable age to become a Coke customer for life than try to convert them later on when they're older. In some of the contracts, the school could even earn additional money by selling more Coca-Cola to its kids. And since many schools were underfunded and in desperate need of money, they would shill Coke's products to their children. This is just one of many ways Coke have managed to circumvent the rules about advertising to children. Another way is that Coke has produced countless collector's items, including Barbie dolls, playing cars, board games, delivery trucks, and other toys that they claim are for adults. Then of course there's all the Christmas ads, deliberately tying Santa and Coca-Cola together in the minds of impressionable children. In 1982, Coke even bought Columbia Pictures so they could easily integrate product placement into their films. Although they later sold the film studio and decided just to pay other companies for Coke product placement instead. But product placement in family films is a clever loophole that allows them to circumvent rules about targeting children. And it works. Research has shown that even for babies, Coke is one of the most recognized brands in the world. But back in the 80s, a problem was emerging for Coke. More and more data was piling up about the negative health effects Coke was having. There'd always been concerns about Coke rotting your teeth, but new data was showing the serious effects Coke was having on obesity, diabetes, and a string of other health issues. For example, one study of children found that even just one extra sugary soft drink a day gave them a 60% greater chance of becoming overweight. Another showed that if babies are exposed to a high intake of sugar, they will be conditioned to depend on sugar for the rest of their lives. For a brand that is built upon its image of wholesomeness, it was a major setback being so directly connected to such a wide variety of health problems, especially since Coke was actively pursuing a strategy of offering bigger and bigger portion sizes of its drink. It also didn't help that the drink contained caffeine. Coca-Cola claimed that this was purely for taste purposes, but in blind taste tests, people couldn't tell the difference with a non-caffeinated version. This left some people wondering why Coke continued to add this addictive caffeine to a drink that's being sold so much to kids. However, the soda industry had come to a similar realization that the tobacco industry had come to. It's easier to cast doubt on the science than debate on policies, because you can always just claim that more research is needed. So, behind the scenes, Coke was pouring hundreds of thousands of dollars into studies to cast doubt on the connection between soft drinks and obesity and diabetes. Unsurprisingly, the studies paid for by Coke generally claimed that Coke wasn't causing many health problems. However, they conveniently didn't mention who'd funded those studies. Coke also spent endless millions of dollars on lobbying state officials against sugar taxes and stronger dietary guidelines. They reportedly made deals behind closed doors about donating to certain politicians' campaigns in favor of special treatment for Coke. They also continued to throw billions of dollars into sponsoring athletes and major sporting events to try and create the illusion of a connection between great athletic performance and Coca-Cola. However, Coke could sense they could only stall for so long before the science became too undeniable to dispute, so they began expanding into other drinks. For example, a bottled water brand called Dasani. However, this immediately backfired when it launched in the UK, as it was quickly discovered that this expensive bottled water had essentially just come out of a local tap. Now, Coke tried to defend itself by explaining they run the water through some kind of purification process, but this just made things worse, because it turns out they'd accidentally added a bad batch of minerals that contaminated the water. As a result, over 500,000 bottles in circulation had to be withdrawn from shops over safety fears. In other words, Coke's attempt to produce a healthy drink had ended up with them being accused of selling expensive, contaminated tap water. However, this wasn't the worst of Coke's contamination problems. In 1999, in Belgium, children started becoming ill after drinking Coca-Cola, eventually leading to the recall of all Coke products. France also reported more than 100 people sick from bad Coke and temporarily banned their products as well. The company was very slow to respond to any of these issues and was accused of not taking the problem seriously enough. Then in India, Coke was accused of contaminating the groundwater with wastewater. Coke actually admitted they had a wastewater issue, but insisted they'd fix the problem. However, later independent tests still found traces of toxic sludge produced at Coca-Cola's Indian plants, which reportedly has made the land barren, killed local animals that drank it, and destroyed the livelihoods of local farmers. The Center for Science and Environment in New Delhi also announced it found pesticide in both Coke and Pepsi that, if consumed over a long enough period, could cause cancer, birth defects, and severe disruption to the immune system. One woman from a local village told journalists, "Before this company came, our lives were comfortable and beautiful. After the company came, within 6 months the taste of the water changed." Another said, "When we bathe, our heads swim, it pains, and we scratch all over." And Coke's environmental record continued to get worse. You see, the company also runs bottling plants in several drought-plagued areas, and officials have blamed Coke for a dramatic decline in available water. This problem was particularly bad in parts of Mexico, because between 2000 and 2006, Mexico's president was a man who'd formerly been the head of Coca-Cola Mexico. The president started giving his former company favorable treatment after getting elected, and during his presidency, he gave Coca-Cola 27 water concessions, which many claim allowed Coke to pollute water and even steal water owned by indigenous people. One local resident claimed, "There used to be a lot of water here, now there is a scarcity. They are not paying anything and they are just taking our water away." During this presidency, Coke's sales increased 50% and became the most popular drink in the country. Critics claim this is yet another example of Coke benefiting from shady deals with politicians. Of course, Coca-Cola has always had to acquire vast quantities of natural resources in order to succeed. In fact, it's the largest sugar buyer in the world. However, as the 90s arrived, Coke began to face yet more negative publicity. For example, in Mexico City, one shopkeeper said she was told her deliveries of Coke would stop unless she removed an alternative cola from her store. Meanwhile, in Brazil, Coke trialled a new type of vending machine that would increase the price of Coke depending on how hot it was outside. Also, to further boost sales figures and trick investors, Coke engaged in channel stuffing, forcing distributors to buy more syrup than they needed at the end of quarters to make Coke's profits look better than they really were. However, the backlash against Coke reached its peak when in 2003, a campaign was launched called Stop Killer Coke that claimed the Coca-Cola Company was responsible for the murder of union members who worked in Coke bottling plants in Colombia. Now, Coke deny this and the exact truth remains unclear, but what we do know is that since 1989, countless unionized workers employed at the Coca-Cola bottling plants in Colombia have been killed and many more have received death threats. In fact, in 2001, the International Labour Rights Fund filed a lawsuit against Coca-Cola bottlers claiming they'd openly engaged death squads to intimidate, torture, kidnap, and even murder union officials in Latin America. A few years later, another lawsuit was brought about by Guatemalan workers alleging that they and their families at the Coca bottling plant had been victims of violence after the workers decided to join unions. They'd wanted to join a union because some workers were earning just $15 per day for 15-hour shifts. However, again, there were allegations of kidnap, torture, and murder of union leaders and their family members. Now, Coca-Cola argued that the Guatemalan plant is independently owned, and Coke had absolutely no knowledge of these incidents. And Coke genuinely may be telling the truth here. We don't know if they actually colluded or knew about the violence, or if they just indirectly benefited. But either way, the unions have been decimated by the attacks and threats. And in parts of Latin America, Coke has been referred to as the sparkle of death. What we do know for sure is that the deeper you look into Coke's past, the more you chip away at their wholesome image they tried to present. For example, Asa Candler, the entrepreneur who incorporated the Coca-Cola Company and played a pivotal role in popularizing the drink, once said, "The most beautiful sight that we see is the child at labor. The younger the boy began work, the more beautiful." However, before we all get the pitchforks out, I think it's important to acknowledge that if you look at any giant company with such a long history, you're probably going to find some ethical disasters in their past. That's not an excuse, but a reminder that business is brutal. Many of the same criticisms of Coke also apply to many of their competitors. And of course, Coke has done plenty of good for the world too. We can't come to conclusions from just one side of the story. It's never black and white. What's ironic though, is that some of the worst press Coca-Cola has ever received was nothing to do with any of these moral or legal issues. Nope, Coke's biggest backlash of all came from changing the taste of their drink.